That's right, we're already back to Disney for screen to console because let's be honest, they will probably have bulk of the video game movie tie-ins thanks to Disney Interactive. I feel like Disney was probably one of the forefathers of this marketing trend, or at least for my age, it was one of the forefathers of this trend. And of course, one of my favorite Disney IPs would also have a tie-in as well, and I'm talking about Lilo and Stitch. For the mounds of Disney stuff out there, Lilo and Stitch has always stood out to me as a prime example of Disney being at its best, despite, that live action remake around the corner. I figure I'm about due for a rewatch of this classic and figured why not check out the PS1 video game tie-in as well on this week's Screen to Console.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
The film opens at the Galactic Federation headquarters where the scientist Jumba stands on trial for his experiments. They believe he created something horrific, which, behold, is actually just Stitch, or at this point known as Experiment 626, a creature with power and an instinct to destroy everything. 626 is transported to a prison facility where he is going to be banished to a desert asteroid. Well, 626 being the ball of chaos he is, escapes and crash lands on Earth. I love the fact that 626 is a wild psycho that is pure chaos, while also just being super cute. It's a great character design that allows to, sell a lot of plush, but also allows for the action to be fun and bombastic, and that's backed up thanks to its beautiful animation and great pounding sound design that's a fun mixture of science fiction sounds and basic everyday sounds. To try and track down 626, the Galactic Federation makes a deal with Jumba to capture 626 in exchange for his own freedom. Also, the opening song is a complete bop, by the way. Then we're introduced to Lilo, who is late for class as she was out swimming, shrugging her commitments for her own fun. Because she shows up to class soaking wet, it causes the others to slip and fall. We are instantly shown that Lilo has a weird sense of imagination that makes her stand out compared to everyone else. She also bites one of the other girls, which leads to a great foreshadowing moment.
Is this look infected to you? Yeah.
But it's also a great way to ostracize Lilo from the other kids because she's a misfit. Not a nitwit, just a misfit. Her sister returns home to find that Lilo has nailed the door shut, to which her sister Nani begins to threaten her when the social worker shows up. That's pretty good timing.
Oh, I'm gonna stuff you in the blender, push puree, then bake you into a pie and feed it to the social worker.
Cobra Bubbles, and we'll just call Bubbles from here on out, tells her that she has 3 days to change his mind or that he'll be forced to take Lilo away. Lilo being Nani's younger sister and Nani having to step up to raise Lilo after their parents passed away. I love that my Blu-ray still has the dryer scene. I guess Disney Plus changed this to a basket instead. It's a dumb and unnecessary change, but I'm glad my copy still has the original. After a fight between her and Nani, they quickly but effectively show the hardships of their predicament, but also their loving nature as siblings, showcasing how quickly emotions can change in a family from frustrating to joking. It's this level of emotional whiplash that really bonds their complex relationship dynamics that forges a believable and established connection between the two characters. Lilo sees a falling star and wishes for a friend as Stitch crash lands into Earth. I will always love the scene where Stitch becomes roadkill. Stitch is captured by the dog catchers, but he escapes when Jumba starts shooting at him. Stitch sees that there's an adoption going on at the pound, and this is when Nani takes Lilo to adopt a pet. So Stitch uses this chance to be taken home to escape Jumba, using Lilo like a human shield, even changing his look to look more appealing. Lilo and Stitch then spend Lilo and Stitch, that's where the name comes from. Lilo and Stitch end up spending the day together as Stitch gets increasingly more frustrated in his lack of being able to bring on complete destruction. When they go to Nani's work for dinner, they meet David, who is Nani's hopeless romantic. Jumba and Pleakley are also there, Pleakley being Jumba's appointed handler, and they lure Stitch over where Stitch attacks them, causing Nani to lose her job. Back at the house, Stitch goes nuts, where we get the Ohana line.
Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left
behind.
During this scene, you can see Stitch really kind of sink that moment in. It's kind of giving his first chink in his destructive armor, showing that Lilo's drawing of him at the dinner scene is true. There is some good in him. To channel his destructive nature, he builds up a city to destroy. When Stitch runs out of destruction, he finds a book on the ugly duckling, which is basically the story of both Lilo and Stitch.
There it is! There it is!
The next morning, Stitch meets Bubbles before they go out looking for a job for Nani. Meanwhile, we get a montage of Stitch learning to be good, but he has a relapse at the beach, which Bubbles sees the whole thing, this leading to Nani and Lilo feeling down. David, though, shows up with surfboards, and we get a surfing montage with another banger song. When Stitch wants to go out to surf with Lilo, Nani and Lilo and 626 head out onto the wave when Jumba jumps out, going after Stitch, which causes Nani and Lilo to wipe out, and since Stitch can't swim swim, he accidentally drags Lilo down with him, and Jumba pulls them both down even further. Bubbles sees the whole thing, but does not see Jumba, and tells Nani that it might be for the best for Lilo if he leaves with her. They head back sad when David says this line,
"I really believed they had a chance. Then you came along."
Heading back to the house, Stitch runs into some ducklings and finds Nani singing to Lilo. When Stitch finds a picture under Lilo's pillow of her family before her parents' car crash, Lilo tells Stitch that he could be a part of the family too, but he decides to leave with the Ugly Duckling book. Now, because of Jumba and Pleakley's failure, the commander and alien sends Captain Gantu to come after 626. Stitch confronts Jumba and Pleakley, and Jumba tells Stitch that he has no family. Like, dog, come on.
You are the father!
Lilo tells Nani that Stitch is gone when David shows up telling Nani that he might have a job lined up for her. Without Stitch, everything seems to be kind of taking place. Well, Stitch decides to come back with a change of heart, wanting to be a part of the family, wanting a place of belonging. This, of course, being after David and Nani already left the house when Jumba comes back to the house causing ultimate destruction, trying to capture Stitch. So Lilo calls Bubbles for help.
Good, my dog found the chainsaw.
Bubbles takes Lilo from Nani when Lilo runs away into the woods, where Stitch gives Lilo her family picture, finally revealing his true self to her. Gantu catches Stitch in a moment of vulnerability, and I love how Gantu just comes stomping around to expose everyone to aliens. And Stitch is able to escape last minute, but Lilo isn't, which leads Nani to start whacking Stitch, demanding answers. Jumba then takes this chance to capture Stitch, and Pleakley calls in for pickup. Nani breaks down since Lilo is gone, and Stitch repeats the Ohana saying to her, and asks Jumba for help, which he just immediately agrees.
He's very persuasive.
Persuasive!
Jumba takes Stitch to their ship, and they go after Lilo. We get another fun and chaotic action set piece where we also get a really nice callback to a joke earlier in the film. Stitch ends up stealing a gas truck and drives it into a volcano, using the explosion to rocket himself into Gantu's ship to rescue Lilo. After another crash landing, Stitch is captured by the commander and Largehead. Stitch shows them that Nani and Lilo are his family, and Lilo plays the ultimate Uno reverse card.
I paid $2 for him. I own him.
We get a montage of the family excelling together as they rebuild the house with the help of Jumba and Pleakley, and the film ends on a picture of the whole family. Lilo and Stitch is easily in my top 5 favorite Disney animated movies, if not in the top 3. Not only is the film set in a pretty unique environment for Disney's history, mixing that with aliens and creatures, but the film also has a really strong emotional core centered around family and a sense of belonging, taking that Ugly Duckling story and morphing it into something really special with characters that clearly stood on their own for quite some time now, opening up the world into sequels and TV series that from memory were a lot better than almost every other Disney straight-to-video sequels or TV tie-ins. It takes a pretty tried and true story and presents a new way of telling it, branching out to create something special. This also being in the back end of Disney's more traditional animation that looks great to this day. It's a film that has a true sense of timelessness that is what captured so many people to love Disney films. It's something that Disney used to excel at, and Lilo and Stitch is a prime example of it. With Lilo and Stitch, there's a lot of directions you could definitely take a video game, so let's see what the PS1 tie-in is like. Can we just take a moment of how flawless I've been with this so far? Until I do that. I had to say it, didn't I? Lilo and Stitch for the PS1, also known as Disney's Lilo and Stitch Trouble in Paradise, was released in 2002 and was developed by Blitz Games. Starting a new game, you open up with a low-res cutscene from the film when Stitch lands on Earth and Lilo finding Stitch at the dog shelter. After the FMV, we cut to the game, and yeah, it looks like a PS1 game. Lilo tells Stitch we need to find some photos for her wall with the object to collect 16 photographs. It's kind of an interesting idea to use as a collectible since Lilo actually collects photos in the movie of just like random moments or people in her life. It's a smaller detail, but at least it's connected to the movie and a clever inclusion for the game. Loading into the first level of the game, Koa Wood, I noticed something familiar. Something very familiar. Something that was kind of a classic for the system. Yeah, this is basically just a Crash Bandicoot clone. This first level looks straight ripped from Crash, even having plant monsters and porcupines. Lilo has a small range voodoo attack, and throughout the levels you can collect flowers, which is basically this game's Wampa fruit. You have a certain amount of photos you can collect in the levels, and within a couple of minutes I was through the first level. This sending me into the first boss fight against this rock monster. I love the fact that there's just like random monsters in the game. Like yes, in Lilo and Stitch there's aliens, but these rock monsters make like zero sense. The boss fight is just avoid getting hit and the creature will turn around and you attack it. It's super easy. Throughout the game too, you can use mailboxes and levels to save the game. And after defeating the rock monster, we get to play as Stitch, who collects coffee instead of flowers. Stitch has a breath attack, but it's also a very familiar attack. Dare I say, plagiaristic to a point. Oh my god, he even does the crash spin. How is this not just a Crash Bandicoot game? Like, I get it that Disney's all for basically like rinse and repeating ideas. Stitch also has a meter he fills up if he drinks too much coffee, but it doesn't really do like a whole lot. After getting to the end of the course, we had to fight yet another rock monster, and it's the same thing as the last time we fought one. You pretty much bounce back and forth from each level as either Lilo or Stitch, and I guess Lilo will collect other things like pineapples, coins, stars, but they all do the same thing. They're just a different skin. Cameras in the games can act like level checkpoints, and there are other collectibles like clapboards that will unlock things in the gallery throughout levels. There are red and green barrels that act like TNT or nitro from Crash, but after the level with Lilo, we fight yet another rock monster that leads into another level of Stitch. Even the music sounds like Crash music. I mean, sure, surf music fits, and honestly, you could probably score Lilo and Stitch with Crash Bandicoot music and nobody would notice, but it becomes much more obvious once you kind of see all the other blatant ripoffs from Crash. Finishing up the level, this leads into another FMV from the movie that turns into a boss battle against Myrtle, where you have to race against her. Kind of reminding me of like those Randall race scenes from Monsters Inc. Screen Team. After raising hell and praising Dale, we beat Myrtle, and we get another FMV from the movie that leads into the game introducing Cobra Bubbles. Oh god, Bubbles, what have they done to you? The next level is pretty much like the boulder level from Crash, where you run away from a Monsters Inc. reject, and this is one where you have to collect records instead of photos. You pretty much just have to take on these rock creatures after every level, and it gets old after the first, so when you have to do this over and over again, it just becomes like a hindrance on the gameplay. Also found out that Lilo can pick up red barrels and drop them. You can use this to take something out if you need to, but I never really used it. Back to playing as Stitch, I somehow ended up playing the same level as the level before for some reason, because the map in the game is kind of a little bit convoluted to figure out where you have been and where you need to go, but you can fast travel to a different level using that map, which is nice because it is easy to just get turned around in the game, and this saves you from having to replay levels, which is what I ended up using afterwards. The never-ending supply of rock monsters, I'm just like straight up Dwayning these Rock Johnsons, and I'm tired of it. The next level breaks up somewhat of the monotony with being a side scroller that basically plays out the same way as every other level before it. I'm starting to realize though that Stitch is just way more fun to play as than Lilo, because Lilo's terrible attack range that just leads to a lot of cheap shots, where Stitch is just a little bit more fun to control. Lilo can also call down the ice cream man to take out an enemy if you have a voodoo spoon, but again, I didn't really use it very much. This level leads us into Jumba and Pleakley's camp, where you guessed it, rock monster. This next level introduces some new enemies, but it's the same formula. Well, we'll have to repeat a level because we missed a record, so just know going into this game that if you miss a record or like a photo, you'll have to go back through because you do need to get all of them to progress forward. Also, apparently if you collect 100 of all the levels like basic collectibles, you'll get an extra life, but there was very few times I was able to get to a point where I would actually be able to collect 100 in that level. Once I found the missing record though, we get another FNV where Stitch chews on Pleakley's head, and we get a level where we have to outrun Jumba, and you basically just need to spam jump and zigzag to avoid Jumba's shots because he is actually really hard to avoid. He's like a dead shot. Well, once we get to the end of the level, another FMV, and we head off into the last section of the game. Already. This time we need to collect 16 trackers. Again, this section is just more of the same for the most part, typical Crash style levels that lead into more rock monsters to fight. I will say each section the rock monsters can take more damage to kill, but they fight the exact same way, so it just becomes a longer dragged out fight with it's just a nothing burger. There's another level where you need to outrun Cobra Bubbles just like Jumba, and you end up playing a couple more levels of Stitch until you get to the final FMV where Gantu shows up. With Stitch escaping Gantu, we get into the final boss fight of the game where it's just another outrun level. Sure, it's obnoxious like the Jumbo level where it's hard to avoid being hit, but it's the same thing over and over and over again. There are 3 level types: standard Crash, side scrolling, and outrun, and that's all you get. Well, you get to the end of the level via gas truck, which launches us into an FMV of the quick ending from the film, and bam, credits. That's it. It's about an hour and maybe 40 minutes long, and that's with me replaying 2 levels. Like, it's basically the same length as the movie as well. Lilo and Stitch is one of my favorite Disney properties, and in my opinion, it's one of the few IPs where the sequels don't really suck either. Disney did spend a lot of time expanding Lilo and Stitch through the world of several sequels and a TV series, so I'm sure there's probably a good game somewhere out there, although, surprisingly, there's only a couple to choose from. The film itself is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies that balances family strifes, adolescence innocence, and intergalactic species, told through both humorous and emotional beats that really come to life on screen. However, despite the game to try and rip off the movie's narrative quality by just flat out having cutscenes from the movie and doing nothing else but that, it fails to carry any of the charm or wit from the film into the game. The cutscenes from the film are completely out of place, as well as the in-game story doesn't really follow the film all that much, so these cutscenes are just kind of jarring. Kind of similar to Monsters Inc. Monsters Inc. though did have somewhat more of its own story, and it was also kind of backed up by better gameplay. This just feels like a straight up Crash Bandicoot knockoff that's barely longer than the movie itself, providing little gameplay originality or replayability. Sure, the gameplay itself is mildly fun as you play the game because it's ripping off a proven formula, but when the credits roll and the game goes back in the case, that's as far as it leaves a lasting impression. It's a forgettable and underwhelming experience that's only held up by a better film and a better game, which is why Lilo and Stitch gets the rating of watch it.